Hey, it's your history homie Howser, and today we're at Pio Pico State Historic Park to learn about the life of Don Pio Pico. He was once the most powerful man in California, a governor, landowner, and one of the richest men of his time. But by the end of his life, he had lost nearly everything. And today we're going to learn how that happened. Pio de Jesus Pico was born on May 5, 1801, at Mission San Gabriel to Jose Maria Pico and Maria Eustaquia Gutierrez, where his father served as a corporal. A true reflection of California's multicultural foundation, Pio's ancestry included African, Spanish, Italian, and Native American lineages. He spent his childhood in San Diego, where his father continued his military service, and briefly returned to Mission San Gabriel in 1818 before moving back to San Diego after his father's passing in 1819 to assume much of the responsibility of supporting his family, while his brother Jose Antonio served in the military. The 1820s were a time of great change for both the Picos and the people of California. In 1821, Mexico won its independence from Spain, spurring a new wave of optimism that swept through young Californios like Pio Pico. He launched his business career in San Diego, opening a general store that sold everything from liquor and furniture to mules. His business required him to travel all across Alta California, which put him in contact with many of the influential California families, sparking his interest in politics. In 1826, he was elected to the newly formed Diputación, or territorial legislature, and in 1829, he received his first land grant of the nearly 9,000-acre Rancho Jamul from Governor Jose Maria de Chandia near San Diego. He was re-elected several times to the legislature and served as interim governor for 20 days in 1832 after leading a successful revolt against unpopular governor Manuel Victoria. The rest of the decade cemented his status as one of the most powerful figures in California. As a leading voice for the secularization of the missions in 1834, he played a huge role in the transfer of enormous landholdings from the Franciscan missionaries to his political allies and fellow rancheros, a move that came at the direct expense of the indigenous people to whom the land had been rightfully promised. That same year, his wedding to Maria Ignacia Alvarado became the social event of the era. Governor Jose Figueroa served as the best man, and hundreds of guests attended the three-day celebration in Los Angeles. Pio Pico's influence only continued to grow from there, serving as mayordomo, or administrator, of Mission San Luis Rey from 1835 to 1840. The 1840s began as an era of immense wealth and expansion for Pio Pico. In 1841, he and his younger brother Andres acquired the colossal Rancho Santa Margarita de las Flores, a land grant of over 133,000 acres that is the present-day site of Camp Pendleton. In 1845, after having led another successful revolt against another unpopular governor, he was declared governor and moved the office from Monterey to his adobe in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, his second tenure as governor would also be short-lived. The simmering tensions between the United States and Mexico reached a breaking point in 1846, and war broke out between the countries. U.S. troops under the command of Robert F. Stockton and John C. Fremont marched into California, and several battles were fiercely fought between San Diego and Los Angeles. Governor Pico fled to Baja California to seek reinforcements, but with U.S. forces attacking Mexican ports, no troops could be spared. He was ordered to remain in Sonora for the duration of the war, leaving his brother General Andres Pico to lead the Mexican forces in defense of California. Despite fierce resistance, the Californios were ultimately overwhelmed, and on January 13, 1847, Andres Pico signed the Treaty of Cahuenga, ending Mexican rule over California. The war would end the following year, and Pio Pico returned to Los Angeles as a private citizen and continued to add to his wealth. The gold rush in 1849 brought an influx of people to the state, and rancheros like Pico made a fortune supplying the prospectors with beef. In 1852, he finished acquiring the nearly 9,000-acre Rancho Paso de Bartolo, which he called El Ranchito, and built the adobe home where he hoped to retire with his wife. The 1850s were poised to be a great decade, until tragedy struck. His beloved Maria Ignacia Alvarado passed away in Santa Barbara at just 44 years old. Pico continued to invest in property over the next 2 decades, including building the Pico House Hotel, the first 3-story building in the city at a cost of $85,000. However, his fortunes began a steady decline due to a perfect storm of risky investments, lavish spending, overgenerosity, gambling, and the unethical actions of shady businessmen who took advantage of his inability to read or speak English. One of the most infamous examples of his gambling was the time he lost $25,000 on a single horse race, the equivalent of $1 million today. All this resulted in Pico spending the last decades of his life entangled in constant legal battles, mostly fighting to hold on to his land. By 1880, he couldn't pay his debts and lost the Pico House Hotel to foreclosure for just $16,000. The most devastating blow came in 1892 when he was evicted from his beloved El Ranchito, the home he had built for his retirement with his late wife. He had signed what he believed to be loan documents, but in reality, he had signed over the deed to his ranch. He spent the last 2 years of his life nearly penniless, relying on the charity of close friends, and passed away on September 11, 1894. After his eviction and passing, El Ranchito fell into disrepair, and the land was bought by the city of Whittier for its water wells, and by 1906, the adobe was in danger of being demolished and used as road fill. In 1909, a community effort led by Pico's friend Harriet Russell Strong saved the adobe and raised funds for its restoration. In 1917, the property was deeded to the state of California, and 10 years later, it became one of our first state historic parks. Since then, the site has undergone several restorations, from the adobe reopening as a museum in 1946 to the 1968 floor replacement and the 2000 restoration of its historic landscape. The park stands today as a window into a bygone era. Today, Pio Pico State Historic Park sits on 5 acres and features the restored 15-room adobe, a historic orchard and garden that feature the type of fruits, vegetables, and herbs that would have grown when Don Pio lived here, a corral, dovecote, and traditional horno, the symbolic Camino Real bell marking where the historic route once passed, a pergola wrapped in grapevines, and picnic areas and walking paths that offer a quiet escape from the city. Stepping into the adobe gives you a glimpse into the private life of a man who was once the most powerful in California and what life was like at El Ranchito. One of my favorite features are the unrestored walls that reveal the adobe bricks. You can actually see the straw that was used to make them. And throughout the adobe are pieces of everyday life and even items that belong to Don Pio and his family. Born the subject of the Spanish crown, rising to become the last governor of Mexican California, and ending his days as a citizen of the United States, Pio Pico lived through and helped shape one of the most dramatic transformations in California history. And while he lost nearly everything he had built along the way, his legacy lives on in the places that bear his name and right here at his beloved El Ranchito. Thank you for joining me on today's trip to Pio Pico State Historic Park to learn about the life of Don Pio Pico. Make sure to subscribe and join me on the next adventure when we, because remember, it's you and me, continue to explore the history that can be found in this great big backyard of ours we call California. See you soon.